Hey all, it's Starzy and today we are here to do my March wrap-up. I feel like March was kind of just mostly work, eat, sometimes game, sleep, repeat. It's saying that I did also read some things along the way, although I feel like the last week or two of the month, I don't think I finished reading anything. I don't think I read much at all. But yeah, that's kind of felt like that's mostly been my life over the past month. Saying that, like, let's just get right on into the media I consumed. The first things that I finished reading in March were a couple of graphic novels, a couple of comic books, because I read Rat Queen's volumes 2 and 3, and neither of these really captured me in the way the first volume did, because the first volume I like instantly fell in love with. These ones I didn't quite have that same attachment to them, and especially in the second one there were various different art styles throughout it, which made it feel very disjointed to me. And just with everything going on, I still definitely enjoyed it. These are fantasy comics with humor, etc. And I still enjoyed it, I just didn't love it like that first one, and I think I enjoyed the third volume a little bit more than the second. I definitely, I don't regret reading them, I still had a good time overall. I just didn't fall in love with these ones as much as I have a great deal of love for that first volume, but still enjoying seeing these characters in their dynamics and the shiz they're getting into. I then listened to Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins, which is a thriller. The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins was actually the only thriller I read last year that I actually enjoyed. I was quite critical of pretty much every other thriller I read. So this is a new release that I was anticipating, and this is about a group of young people who go to this isolated island to have a holiday, and you know, maybe some things go wrong along the way. There's a little bit of interpersonal drama, all of that. A lot of this book didn't necessarily feel like a high stakes thriller. There was a lot of just like interpersonal drama going on, but at the same time, like, I was thoroughly engaged the whole time, and I did quite enjoy listening to this story. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Yeah, I had a good time with it. It wasn't necessarily something like, you know, brand new and innovative and totally shocking or anything, but I definitely had a good time with it, and was still enjoying everything getting revealed along the way, and we kind of go between like flashbacks and what's currently happening on the island, and I enjoyed it. I've seen kind of mixed reviews for this book, but I was in the camp of I enjoyed it, and so I've enjoyed both of the thrillers I've read from the author so far. So, and it's kind of just like a really easy listening experience. Both of the books I've had that experience with, where they were just like easy listening, which is sometimes just what you need, you know? I then listened to Hook, Line and Sinker by Tessa Bailey, which is the sequel to a book I never remember the name of, but these are like companion novel romances. So this one is following the sister of the main character from the first book, and she works for like a movie company, and she's convinced the company to go film in this little isolated village that we saw in the first book, and it's really like a friends to lovers situation going on here. And I really enjoyed this as well. 4 out of 5 stars. I probably enjoyed this more than the first one, just from the perspective of I personally liked these characters a lot more. Like, I enjoyed the first book, but they weren't necessarily my favorite types of characters, because we had the socialite and the grumpy boy, basically, and in this one we have a kind of driven, music-loving woman and a guy who has a bit of a F-boy reputation, I guess. And yeah, I really enjoyed watching their romance unfold, so it was a good time. I also listened to The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics by Olivia Waite. This is a sapphic historical romance. However, I think I slept through a good portion of this book, and not because like it was boring or anything, but because I kept going to listen to it at night, and so I guess it kind of just kept lulling me to sleep. What I did listen to, I enjoyed more or less, and it was sweet enough. Yeah, I can't say too much about it because I kind of just got snippets here and there, but what I listened to was sweet. We kind of have a slight age gap romance between these two women, and one of them's, I guess, kind of fully being herself and for the first time in some ways, and the other one's coming off the back of a breakup because the woman she was seeing got married to a man, given we are in this historical setting. Is this something I should even talk about, given that I probably only was 100% paying attention to maybe half the book? I don't know, but like, it's a thing I technically listened to all of, I just may have been unconscious for some of it. Maybe that's doing the book a disservice, but... I also read The Midnight Girls by Alicia Jasinska. I read her previous novel, The Dark Tide, and quite enjoyed that, especially some of the imagery. And this I was quite excited going into because it was sold as a monster girl romance. It's still a YA fantasy. I was kind of underwhelmed by this though. The Dark Tide wasn't like amazing. It was kind of, in many ways, felt a bit like a typical YA, but I still really enjoyed it, and I especially love like witchy things, and it had that witchy vibe. And I really like monster girls and the idea of like kind of two villains having a romance. It appealed to me. But overall, I just felt kind of bored by a lot of this, and for being what it was, sometimes the stakes didn't feel as high as maybe they should have been. I don't know. I just felt overwhelmed. Like, it's not bad. It was fine, but just that little bit disappointed of feeling so meh about it. It's one of those experiences, you know? I didn't really care for the characters. Supposed to be these kind of not good people, these monster girls, and I just didn't care. Somehow I just didn't care. So this was like sapphic monster girls. Should have been great, but I didn't care. I also listened to The Valley of the Lost, which is the 7th book in the Del Toro Quest series. I finally continued my reread of these because this is my favorite childhood series, like my favorite series from my childhood. So I'm really enjoying getting through that, although it was many months since I last listened to one, but still had a good time with this. It's very nostalgic for me, and I still think it largely holds up for what it is, and I'm always surprised by just how dark it is for a children's series. And yeah, I've been enjoying that. If you've never read the Del Toro Quest series and you haven't any interest in younger fantasy, what are you doing? What are you doing? I don't think I've given you plots for the majority of these books. What was the plot of The Midnight Girls outside of the evil... Oh, they were competing to try to steal a prince's heart. And when I mean steal his heart, I mean like physically rip it from his body. That was kind of the setup we had because they both work for like witches who wanted the heart. In Del Toro Quest, it's very much that traditional kind of questing fantasy with a lot of dark stuff going on, and they're trying to put together the Belt of Del Toro because the evil Shadow Lord rules the lands, basically, and everything's not too happy. And then the last thing that I finished, I technically finished on the 1st of April, but like I read majority of it in March, so I'm just going to talk about it now. And that is The Deep by Nick Cutter, which I also didn't love, but this was a case of, I don't think that it was necessarily badly done. It just didn't appeal to me, I think. It's a horror where there's this basically a pandemic that's gone through the world, the Gets, where people kind of forget everything and then die once they contract this. And so we've got this group of people who are trying to find a cure, and a few scientists have ended up basically like the bottom of the ocean trying to do this. And so this brother gets sent in because his brother's one of the ones down there. He goes under the sea, and for one, I really didn't like this because like I don't want to be trapped underwater, and like yes, that's part of the discomfort you're meant to have because it's horror, but also like not a fun type of horror for me, more just like if I'm not uncomfortable, I'm bored. A lot of just like me not being that interested in books I was reading, I guess, this month. Well, I really enjoyed some things not so much. I don't know, I was uncomfortable with a lot of what was happening, but not in like that way of something feels like effective horror for you, more just in that way of like, I just don't want to be reading this, you know? So I think it was more like a personal taste thing, but then at the same time, there were things that made me uncomfortable, like something that can be unfortunately too common in horror is focusing on like fat bodies as part of the horror. That was a component which I didn't love. Also just some weird stuff going on, and then the way it ended felt so separated from the entire rest of the vibe of the novel, and I don't know. Mostly I think just it didn't work for me, but then there were also some things that I just generally think weren't great. But I don't know. Oh, and also just the amount of like animal cruelty and gross stuff happening to animals made me a bit like, I don't know about this. Was all of this entirely necessary? Just because it's a horror novel doesn't mean we need to be doing that in every chapter. Yeah, I didn't love it. And I read this as part of a book club, technically. Maddie from the Book Pushers book club, Horror Hose. It was the April pick, it was the March pick for that book club, which is kind of what prompted me to read it within this month. And I just didn't love it, honestly. So really a bit of a mixed reading month for me. I did really enjoy some things I read. I slept through at least half of one of the things I was trying to listen to. And there were a couple of things I felt pretty meh about. So that was kind of my reading in March. In terms of TV, I think the only thing we really watched was Bridgerton season 2. We binged through that, and I say we because I thought it was something I was just going to watch on my own like I did the first season. However, Nathan ended up being somewhat invested in it and like commenting on like everything that was happening in a very invested kind of way. So we binged like that whole season together, and I really enjoyed this, especially because I had like some big problems with the first season, especially like that scene and like the assault that was glossed over. This season didn't have a number of the problems that I had with the first season, and it was just like a good time and like your classic pining. The classic pining where I've seen a lot of people like complaining. In fact, even people at my workplace were complaining about the lack of sex in this season, but it was just like, it was beautifully done with that perfect Regency pining and drama. So I really enjoyed it. I did also just watch like a handful of movies. We watched Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. This was Nathan's pick. I was not impressed. It was just silly, okay? Did it have like some cool action sequences and stuff that might have been visually kind of cool? Sure, but overall, not something I ever would have chosen to watch, and it was silly. And also, my thing about these movies is the more movies I watch Ryan Reynolds in, the more I just am convinced like he just plays Ryan Reynolds in every movie. Like he always just seems like just himself in various different situations. You know what I mean? But that was also a sequel to another movie, and I don't know, action comedy, not my thing. We also watched the Forever Purge, which is, I think, the only Purge movie that I hadn't seen at this point. And there's something about the Purge movies, I really like the Purge franchise. It's kind of weird and disturbing, and most of them don't necessarily have a lot of new content because it's just this concept of the Purge, one night a year where all crime is legalized. But I don't know, I always kind of enjoy, I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but I always kind of appreciate watching these movies. And this one was kind of interesting in that perspective of we actually see the day after the Purge, which we don't usually in the movies. That was interesting, and also it was just that terrifying concept of why does this not seem impossible and America is scary. We did also watch Turning Red, the new Disney movie. I know a lot of people have complained about this being like cringe or unrealistic, but honestly the cringe is what made it feel so authentic to like a young teenage experience looking back at my own teen years. Is it one of my favourite animated movies? No, but I appreciated it for what it was, and it did feel very authentic to cringy teenage moments, so. And we watched another new Ryan Reynolds movie, which I haven't logged, and I can't remember what it was called. It's like a brand new one on Netflix. No idea what it was called. Don't remember anything about it other than Ryan Reynolds was in it. And then, of course, we did also go to the cinemas and see The Batman, which I guess I didn't really know what to expect going into this. All I really knew is that obviously Batman, I knew some of the cast, and I knew it was a very long movie. And I'm a big Batman fan. I've been watching Batman media and reading Batman comics since I was very young. You know, starting out with like the 90s movies and the animated Batman series, like, big Batman fan. And I was thoroughly engrossed throughout this entire movie. It was a very dark movie, but also had some very nice visual moments. I loved the music. The music worked so well in this movie. And it was such a darkly disturbing movie where there were times watching it that I almost felt like I was watching a horror movie because of how like dark and disturbing it was. And like all of the acting was so well done, and I think it's also my favorite portrayal of Catwoman, like live action Catwoman. Probably now my favorite live action Catwoman. And like it was such a long movie, and yet it didn't feel long. Like it ended and I was sitting there in the cinema seat and being like, oh, it's over. Like, usually when a movie's that long, I really feel it. I'm not great at sitting there watching something so intensely, just focusing on one thing, but I was fully engrossed throughout the entire, 3 hours or whatever it is, and I just think it was a really good movie. A really dark movie, like the darkest Batman we've had, but it was a good movie. It was a freaking good movie. So I'm really glad that I got to actually go to the cinema and see that. It was... And then, of course, to round out the media that I consumed, let's quickly go over some video games. Of course, I've been playing the usual multiplayer stuff, Lost Ark and Dead by Daylight, been continuing to play that. Still playing a little bit of Pokemon, which I still haven't finished. The game that just came out, which I haven't played a whole lot of yet, but I've really enjoyed what I've played so far, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, which is a Borderlands spin-off, but fantasy. Now, Borderlands 2 is one of my favourite video games, and Tiny Tina was one of my favourite characters from that video game. So Tiny Tina and Borderlands with a fantasy spin, I'm just having so much fun. I'm having so much fun. I'm loving the fantasy aesthetic, but at the same time, it's like classic Borderlands looter shooter and classic Borderlands humor, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. So that's what I'm playing at the moment. I think I've played a couple of other things here and there, like I played a few hours of Death's Door. Oh, and I finished Resident Evil 7. I also finished Resident Evil 7 in March, which my full playthrough of Resident Evil 7 so far is actually on this channel. If you have any interest in watching that, I scream a lot. But weirdly, as much as the game terrified me constantly, I actually really enjoyed my experience playing it, and now that I have finished it, the final installment of that playthrough will also be going up on this channel at some point, so I'm having a real good time. And that and Tiny Tina's are both things that I have been streaming as well, so all of my playthrough of Tiny Tina's so far is also up in VODs on my Twitch channel. Please come hang out on Twitch, that's where I am every week, even when sometimes you only see my face properly like monthly here. Yeah, Twitch is pretty much my favourite place to be. I've made so many great friends through Twitch and gaming. As much as I've made some through this channel as well, but that's kind of the main place I live on the internet, if I'm honest. That's most of the media that I have been consuming over the past month. Let me know what's your favourite book, movie, or game that you've played in March, or if you got this far through the video, leave a bat emoji for me, because I do have my Batsy up here. I decided to put it on my Christmas tree, inspired by the fact that Ali complained she had not seen enough of this bat since I got it, since she did help contribute to me getting this adorable plush. I have like a list of a whole bunch of videos and stuff I want to get out, but at the same time, like, my life's kind of just been work at the moment and sleeping because I've been so exhausted from work. So, but I am about to have a couple of weeks off work, so hopefully I will get some kind of reading video project done during that time. Fingers crossed. You might see something like that coming from me, but otherwise, I appreciate you all so much. Also, a very big thank you because we did just hit 300 followers on YouTube, so thank you so much to everyone who watches my videos. I appreciate you all so much, and I will see you next time. TTFN and Starzyrts. I was talking so much that I completely forgot I had a couple of teas right in front of me, and now it's kind of lukewarm. Cheers.